Good evening, and thank you for joining us. If today's Justice Department budget hearing felt tense, that's because it was about far more than numbers on a spreadsheet. It was about truth, ethics, and whether government lawyers are being pressured to cross lines they are sworn never to cross. If you value clear explanations of what's really happening in Washington, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our continuing coverage.
Madam Attorney General, yesterday, Erez Ruveni filed a whistleblower complaint against the Department of Justice. As I think you know, he was a 15-year veteran of the Department of Justice. He received commendations during the first Trump administration for all his work at DOJ, but he filed a detailed account of his recent experience at the Department of Justice, saying that prior to his determination, that he was terminated after he refused to sign an appeal brief that was unsupported by evidence or the law. And he says, "I didn't sign up to lie." In response to his termination, you made a statement on Fox News a little while ago saying, "At my direction, every Department of Justice attorney is required to zealously advocate on behalf of the United States, and that any attorney who fails to abide by this direction will face consequences." So, General Bondi, I guess the direct question is, he says he was fired because he didn't want to make an untruthful statement to a court of law. I have two questions. Number one, I assume you agree that zealous advocacy does not mean telling untruths to courts of law. And second, if that's not the case, what did you mean by saying he was not a zealous advocate?
Senator Van Hollen, this is all pending litigation, as you're well aware, and the timing of it, I can't discuss pending litigation. This is a whistleblower lawsuit pending within my office, but I will say the timing of it I find suspect, as he takes hits at Emil Bovee, who is one of the best human beings I know, one of the smartest, brilliant men I know, who will soon become a federal judge. And his hearing happens to be today, and I find the irony of the timing of it pretty remarkable, the lawsuit. But this had to do with attorney-client privilege information that was disclosed. I can't talk about the substance, but what I will tell you, and you have obviously my word, any zealous advocacy means to be done ethically and honestly, always. And that's what I mean by zealous advocacy. He also accused Emil Bovee of things that Todd Blanche, who is one of the best human beings I also know, my Deputy Attorney General, was in the room and said did not happen. But again, I wish I could get into greater detail. I can't because it's pending. But I stand by Emil Bovee and I stand by Todd Blanche every day, and I always will.
Well, Madam Attorney General, I will say that his account seems to have lots of information. So as you say, this will obviously be something that's litigated or reviewed through due process procedures. But I have to say that it's very, very disturbing. We've also heard from others in other departments who are responsible for implementing the laws of the United States that they feel uncomfortable about having been asked to do things that they thought were unethical. Let me go on to some of the budget questions, and I really want to follow up on my colleagues, Senator Moran and Senator Collins. But the DOJ grant funding is being sort of cut back on two fronts. One, in April, the department terminated hundreds of grant awards, notifying grantees that their current grant funds were gone, effective immediately. That included, law enforcement training grants, technical assistance awards, some dating back to fiscal year, I think, 2017. So, question number one is, are you going to be releasing those funds? The second concern regarding grants has to do with the monies that were appropriated in this fiscal year, in March, and My understanding is that DOJ is withholding an overwhelming number of notices of funding opportunities, NOFOs, meaning that grantees who rely on these grants, including many who provide services to victims of crimes, are literally in some cases running out of money. For example, the department's biggest grant-making component, the Office of Justice Programs, has only posted one notice for fiscal year 25, NOFO notice. So if you could answer the question with respect to both those pieces.
Sure, and that's a very valid question, Senator. The notices will be going out in coming weeks about the grants. And we did cut grants by 6%, and I'm here to tell every senator, if we did cut a grant that you care about that is specific to your state, please contact me. I've turned on grants that were cut off. So please, if that happens, there's an appeal process, but you can pick up the phone and you can call me, and I would be more than happy to look at that. I never want to take away a grant that is actually helping Americans, helping victims, helping law enforcement, and we're looking at it on a case-by-case basis, and many of those are being appealed already, but you have my word, we will look at all of those, absolutely.
Thank you. And in terms of the other piece of the question, when the notices for information will go out, because the fiscal year obviously is, running out, and we are hearing from lots of entities that are waiting for those notices so they can apply for the grant funding.
Yeah, yes, Senator. The notice of funding is consistent with our priorities, and they're finalizing it right now. It will be going out very shortly.
Very shortly. All right. Thank you.
It'll be posted on a rolling basis, too, I believe.
Okay. If you could just keep us posted on that. And I would appreciate it, Madam Attorney General, if you could have your team or respond to a letter that about 30 senators wrote to you on this topic of the prior fiscal year funds that were frozen.
I will make sure they look at that letter. I think we've received probably thousands of letters.
You've got lots of letters. But we really do need, in order to do our job, to get responses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Attorney General.
At the center of today's exchange was a whistleblower complaint that has sent shockwaves through the Department of Justice. Arez Ruveni, a 15-year veteran DOJ attorney with commendations from the first Trump administration, claims he was fired after refusing to sign a legal brief he believed was unsupported by both evidence and law. His words were blunt and unsettling. "I didn't sign up to lie." That allegation goes to the heart of how justice is supposed to work in America. DOJ attorneys are expected to advocate aggressively for the United States, but they are also officers of the court. Their duty is not just to win, but to tell the truth. Senator Chris Van Hollen pressed Attorney General Bondi directly on that point, asking whether zealous advocacy could ever justify misleading a court. Bondi's response was careful and legally constrained. She declined to discuss specifics, citing pending litigation and whistleblower protections, but she did make one clear statement that matters. She said zealous advocacy must always be ethical and honest. That's an important principle, and one viewer should pay attention to, because the entire dispute now turns on whether that principle was followed in practice. Bondi also raised concerns about timing, suggesting the whistleblower filing was strategically released on the same day as a judicial confirmation hearing for one of the officials named in the complaint. She strongly defended her senior leadership, saying allegations against them were false and contradicted by witnesses in the room. That sets the stage for what will likely be a long legal process where facts, not sound bites, will ultimately matter. If you want continued updates as this case unfolds, don't forget to subscribe so you stay informed. But the hearing didn't stop with ethics. It moved into something that affects communities across the country right now: money. Specifically, DOJ grant funding that supports law enforcement training, victim services, and technical assistance programs. Senator Van Hollen revealed that hundreds of DOJ grants were abruptly terminated earlier this year, some tied to programs dating back to 2017. For organizations on the ground, that meant funding disappeared overnight. No transition period, no warning, just gone. For victim advocacy groups and local law enforcement agencies, that can mean layoffs, closed programs, or victims left without support. Bondi acknowledged the cuts, confirming that DOJ reduced grants by about 6%, but she also made a notable commitment. She told senators directly that if a grant was cut and it genuinely helps Americans, they should call her office. She said grants have already been restored on a case-by-case basis and promised an appeal process that lawmakers can engage with directly. That's significant because it suggests the cuts are not final and that political pressure and oversight still matter. However, it also raises questions about consistency. If funding decisions depend on who calls and who doesn't, that can leave smaller organizations without powerful advocates at a disadvantage. These are the kinds of structural issues viewers should keep an eye on, and we'll continue to break them down here, so make sure you subscribe. The second major funding issue discussed was even more urgent. DOJ has been slow to release new notices of funding opportunities for the current fiscal year. These notices are essential because organizations cannot even apply for grants without them. According to the hearing, the Office of Justice Programs, DOJ's largest grant-making arm, has issued only one notice so far. For many nonprofits, that delay is existential. Without notice, there is no application. Without application, there is no funding. And without funding, programs serving crime victims can simply shut down. Bondi said the notices are being finalized and will be released very shortly on a rolling basis, aligned with DOJ priorities. Lawmakers pressed her to keep Congress informed, especially as the fiscal year clock continues to run. What today's hearing ultimately revealed is a Justice Department under strain, balancing legal ethics, internal accountability, and real-world budget pressures that affect people far beyond Washington. The whistleblower case raises fundamental questions about truth in government litigation. The grant funding debate highlights how policy decisions ripple outward into communities that rely on federal support.